Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. I'm Lottie and today I am doing a lovely DIY for you. So I'm going to do a cottage garden in a pot with you and explain the process as I go. But I just wanted to say hello and welcome. If you've not been on my channel before, make sure you subscribe so that you can keep up to date with all my new videos, but go and check out my old videos as well. I've got lots of DIY videos, I've got garden visits, and I've got some lovely garden tours. So if you prefer a relaxed, non-speaking video, check out my garden tours as well, which are kept up to date seasonally. Maybe you've just got a little space. This is the ideal project for you if you want a cottage garden feel, but you haven't got much space or you're in rented accommodation. This is the DIY for you. So I will leave it there and I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you so much for watching and I really hope, I'd really love to see if any of you recreate this into your own theme style. Just drop me a message down below or share it on my Instagram. Share it to @LottieKnewIt, tag me in @LottieKnewIt, and I'll love to see your creations if you get inspired and make your own cottage garden pot following this video. So before I start putting together our lovely cottage garden container for the summer, I'm going to quickly run through the plants that I'm going to add in. Now there seems to be quite a lot here, doesn't there? But bear with me, it'll all come together and I'll explain when I'm building the container. So to start off with, I always love to add some kind of grass into the container. It's beautiful waftiness, structure, and I love how when the grass comes into flower, the plumes add a touch of either red, purple or golden, which is what this one is doing. It's absolutely stunning. Also find that grasses add movement, so whether they're tall grasses or whether they're shorter like a carex or a steeper tenuissima, they tend to add not only texture but movement, which I always think is really perfect for a garden space where you might put your pot and can enjoy it with a nice cup of tea, because the movement for me I find very relaxing. So I always find a grass is great for adding the structure, form, but also movement, just to give that little bit of extra bit of wellness for yourself when you're watching and looking in your pot. So this one is a calamagrostis. And it will last actually into the autumn. It will throw up a few new flower shoots in the meantime through the summer, but I'm going to leave this on and the plumes will start to dry and they'll keep their structure throughout the rest of the year. Now you can give it a chop if you wanted to, but obviously this is just a display pot for the summer, so tempted to leave them on, but you could chop them and they'll regenerate, but they should regenerate anyway from the bottom up, even leaving the heads on. But yes, so that gives us structure, form, height, because I'm using a tall grass rather than a short grass, and it'll give us some nice movement and flow. And also birds do tend to like to feed a little bit on the seeds, but the insects that hide amongst the flowers and seeds as well, they tend to love nipping in and out and grabbing those. Tend to find that ladybirds like to hang out on here too, in case there's the odd aphid that's found its way up the stem. And then to add more height but a nice pop of calming colour, so sticking with the sort of wellness theme for my cottage garden pot, we've got the lovely Nepeta catmint, and this one's called Six Hills Giant. I like this one because it doesn't sort of flop over into the path. It tends to hold its structure, although you can stake it if it does get a bit heavy, but the idea is it's a much bigger and taller variety. So this is nearly 1 metre in height, so almost as tall as the grass. It brings us down just a little bit of a level, because I like to work in pyramids and triangles when I'm building a container or a border. It's better on the eye to build up and then build down from the top. So this is our next sort of level down, flowering all the way from the bottom, and this will repeat flower through the summer into the autumn. You can snip dead heads off, so once this finishes and browns you can snip it off to the next bud down, so encourage the side shoots to flower, or you could again be harsh, chop it right back, and then it will regenerate completely for the summer, later part of the summer. But you can deadhead and it will just keep flowering from the bottom. Now bees and butterflies love this one, and it's got a lovely sort of aroma to it. Some people don't like it, but it's sort of a gentle citrusy menthol, if that's the right sort of description. Look at that grass moving with it already, beautiful. And then moving on to gorgeous penstemon. Now this one is called Penstemon Garnet. Look at those gorgeous deep blooms. So penstemons can be tricky to grow in the UK, but I found growing them in a pot takes a lot of the stress away. So maybe you've got clay soil, it's too dry, or it's too damp, or too cold. Although a container does make it a little bit susceptible, however it's easier to maintain. So popping a penstemon in a container, you are controlling the conditions that it sits in, therefore not sat in damp too much, not drying out too much because you can water it of an evening in the summer, and then just keep it going and mulching over in the winter. So I found that my penstemons, because I have heavy clay, well, fairly, I say heavy, it's probably mid to heavy clay soil here, but worked a lot of good stuff into it. So we do have problems with penstemons in the actual ground, but having them in a container, they have come back. So that's why I like to add a penstemon in a container, because even people that struggle normally, it's a great way of having a penstemon in your garden. So that one is a penstemon garnet. Look at those gorgeous blooms and the contrast between the catmint, that lovely delicate purple, and the lovely plumes of our Calamagrostis grass, just really outstanding. Now to complement that, let's come down. I've got euchera. So good old euchera. I like to add in foliage. Again, a bit more controllable. So if you've got a sort of semi-shade, semi-sun part of the garden, this would be ideal. They do like sunshine, but they just need to be kept on top of watering, which is why, again, ideal for containers. If you're struggling to grow eucheras in a sunny garden, the taller plants will add a little bit of protection and shade for it in a small space in the container, but also you can keep on top of the watering a little bit easier than you would in a border potentially. So I like to add that in for foliage colour, dramatic foliage colour at that, form, shape, bringing our levels down. So talking of pyramids, we're bringing our level down. And then Scarvola, a gorgeous annual plant. So I've got 4 perennials, and I'm going to put some annuals in for some lovely summer colour to fill the gaps. So this one's a great sort of upright but also slightly flopping variety. So again, sort of a bit of height, but then it gently flops around as well. Good old petunia, can't go wrong with a good garden performer's petunia. So nice purpley colours, so bringing our tones together, so pinks and purples and mauves. And then coming to lobelia, because it's a great gap filler. Now this looks like a lot, doesn't it, for such a small pot, but actually it's going to fit in beautifully and it will give you a fantastic display. So let's start popping these together. Right, so this is our container. This is a Stewart's container. I love Stewart's. This is not an ad, by the way, but I like Stewart's. They have such a good range in their lightweight pots. It looks like natural stone. It looks quite modern, but I really like mixing modern with like cottage garden or traditional gardening styles. I think the contrast is actually a really good complement. So I'm starting off with my lovely Stewart's pot, drainage holes in the bottom. And I'm going to use polystyrene, a great way of using up something that can't really go to the landfill at the moment, and people are still using polystyrene at the moment for packaging, unfortunately. I use it in most of my containers, even my big hanging baskets that need a bit of filler at the bottom. Takes the weight out, so keeping it fairly lightweight compared to stone or broken crockery. Also, because of the polystyrene, it creates a bit of a thermal layer. So in the winter, everything in a pot is more susceptible than it would be if it's in the ground, from a cold point of view, not from a wetness point of view, from a cold point of view. Sorry, I'm competing with the birds, which is never a bad thing. So it keeps the thermals, I found, and actually helps plants survive when we get a very cold strike. It takes a strike out the bottom of the pot and the floor, especially if you're on a cold patio, for instance, and keeps the roots a little bit protected from that, as well as acting as a bit of a drainage reservoir and separating roots from sitting in damp water, which is highly likely to happen at any time of the year in our garden. I think the robin is telling me that I'm in his special place because he's been getting worms from here. So he's very much giving me a sing song at the moment, just to compete with me. So I hope you're enjoying it and it's not annoying. I never find them annoying. Anyway, so in with our layer of polystyrene, so acting as a drainage, but also acting as a thermal layer, and lifting the plant roots off the floor. So in the winter months, it just gives them a little bit of extra protection. So let's go in with our polystyrene. So that's my layer. So it's quite a deep layer. So enough to act as a good reservoir and drainage system, but also a nice thermal layer, as I said, for the winter, just taking the base and splitting the roots from the base and the cold floor if you put it on a patio. So also I meant to say with polystyrene, you can of course reuse it. So you can leave it in the container, or if you've got a bit of a disease problem, you just take it out, disinfect it, and then pop it back in again if you're renewing your pots for annual displays or hanging baskets. This one won't be so much. So this is a perennial container mixed with a few annual plants. So the plants in here will come back year on year, and they will last in this pot between 3 to 4 years, maybe a bit more. It's a small pot for the amount that I'm putting in. But actually, if you keep on top of mulching, so at the end of the season when things have died back, give it a good mulch as you would in a border. So a nice layer of compost, peat-free compost, organic matter, manure, probably better in the spring for manure really, but bark chip mixed with compost, and mulch it. Then they will come back next year, and then keep on top of the feeding. So anything in a container will always do better and will always need more nutrients, because the nutrients will leach out the base. There's nowhere for them to go other than out of this pot. So regular feeding. So you should really do an autumn feed, which I always suggest an all-rounded feed, or something that's quite high in phosphorus and potassium. So you could put bone meal and mix it in with your top dressing, which will then soak into the compost through the autumn winter, ready for the following spring's growth. And then in the spring, once signs of frost have finished, you could give it a generic plant feed like a Grow More, Miracle Grow, something like that that's, you know, just an all-rounder. Or you could give it a bit of seaweed for high nitrogen, just to get the growth going. So, and then just keep it topped up through the summer. During the summer months, I wouldn't worry about it for the first year, but for your second and third year, I certainly would give them another sort of high phosphorus potassium feed. So tomato food through the summer months, once every 3-4 weeks, just to top them up and make them keep looking fresh, because in a container you can keep a display going for years. It's just about feeding, topping up the nutrients and compost, and also watering. Don't let them dry out. And the drainage you've got covered. You've got a nice drainage reservoir in there already. So it's just about being sensible, and remembering it's in a container. Anything in a container will need more feeding if you want it to look good for longer. Anyway, that's my spiel. So there's a little bit of a tip there for you. So now we need to go in with our compost. Of course I'm using peat-free multi-purpose. I get mine at the moment for my containers. I have two favourites. I've got B&Q, which is on a multi-buy usually, and it's just a multi-purpose peat-free compost. Or I also like Rocket Grow container and basket compost, both of which are peat-free, both of which are fairly good value for money compared to a lot on the market, and tend to have a good texture and tend to last quite nicely through a good season. So a good layer in. Make sure you always break up compost as you go. When it's been in a barrel and it's compacted, you don't want that in your container. So if there's any clumps, a bit like making a crumble, give it a little bit of a rub and a sprinkle just to break everything up. Give it a tap, get the air out, let it settle a bit. I'm not going to go too much higher than that because our root systems, being quite nice, mature perennials, are quite large. So we're going to go with those first and then build the compost up around it. I have a multi-purpose slow release feed that I always add in to a new container or annual containers every year or every season. And it just helps keep everything balanced over a longer period. So if you're on holiday, for instance, so during the summer months, at least you've got something in there that you know is going to slowly release feed. Or if you forget a week's feed when you're supposed to have done it, there's something in there already. But for optimum output, your input should be a mixture of slow release and then topping up with a plant feed like Tomato Right, for instance, or tomato feed should I say, or Miracle Grow if that's preferred by you, or Grow More, whatever generic feed that you like to use whilst watering. But I always put in a slow release because it just takes the edge off and pressure off yourself. If you have forgotten, at least you know there's something in this compost to keep it going, keep the nutrients held and balanced. And I usually put about a small handful for this sort of size pot. Gently sort of manoeuvre it around. I'm not going to dig it through because when you water, and when the roots sort of find their way, it will find its way down. Ultimately, if you were doing this in a border, you wouldn't want to put feed in, because you wouldn't allow the roots to go off and find their own nutrients. In a container, they need the nutrient help, so don't worry about digging it further down. It will move with time as the roots and the water push everything around. So I just do a gentle sort of scrape across the surface and not have to dig it in too much. So first in, we're going to go with our Calamagrostis. Give the pot a little squeeze. Squeeze and a tease. Tease of the roots at the bottom if you need to, just to help get it out of the pot. Breaking roots won't hurt the plant. If anything, it actually encourages it to set more down. That is a stubborn plant. There we go. We are out. Look how amazing that root system is. Now, if I was putting this in a border, I would be teasing these roots and breaking them apart as much as possible. It's going in a container, there's nowhere for them to go, you just want them to anchor in ever so slightly. So a gentle pull apart, just to give them the idea that they need to spread a little bit, but not too much. So it's a gentle, you're not tearing roots off or tearing it apart completely, just a gentle tease, just to encourage it to settle in. So this is going to go to the back of our container. So that's going to give us structure and height. Oh, there's a little grass seedling we don't want in there. Compost. So that's going to give us a nice bit of height. So you can see I've left a little bit. So the surface of the plants and the compost is about 1 centimetre to 2 centimetres. It'll be about 1 centimetre towards the end once we've got the compost and the top layer in. But it just gives you a bit of give when you're watering. You don't want to fill it right to the brim with compost, any container, because as soon as you water it and you're heavy-handed with a watering can, the compost and water will go over the sides and make a mess, and you'll lose the compost and nutrients. So always leave a little gap at the top of the pot between the top of the plant and the top of the pot for watering purposes. So we're in with our grass. Next up, at this stage, if I come in a bit closer to you, if there's any dead plants, dead foliage, sorry, you can pull that off now if you want to. Ultimately, this is a display for maybe a patio or somewhere where you're going to see it a lot easier in a container. So if you want to tidy it up, you can be my guest. Don't have to, but I like to, because it just tidies it up and I know it's done before it's planted. So any yellow leaves, also taking off anything that's yellowing puts the energy into the stuff that is growing and new shoots that are coming and forming. So again, nice strong root ball, gentle tease and pull, but not too much. So just enough to encourage it to settle in the pot and anchor in. Give it a good push. There we go. And just like we did with the other two, a gentle push and tease for those roots. And then that's going to go to the other side of that grass. I'm pushing them as close as I can together to keep the height towards the back, which you can't see at the moment. But if I bring it down a bit, you see how that's coming together? Penstemon, the grasses, the Nepeta. So you can sort of see how the colours are coming together. Now I'm just building this, so I'm just showing you how I'm building it, and then I'll show you how it looks properly once it's done. So that's our height at the back. Now we've got a lovely bit at the front here to fill. So this is where the euchre comes in. Right, here's our lovely euchre. Look at that foliage, and that's going to just drop beautifully in the front. How is that looking, guys? So you can see that's instantly filled that gap. There's a bit of bird poo on there. Let's get rid of that, shall we? So we're already looking really full. Let me just take the phone off and I'll give you a quick short tour of what it looks like so far. Because some of you might be thinking, well, that's full. What are you going to do with the other plants that you showed us? So let me just talk to you about it a little bit more. So here we go. You can have a little bit of a view. So forgive my plants in the background, my stock plants, but you can get the idea. So we've got our lovely height. And then coming down, we've got that beautiful foliage at the front. But for me, this is just half the display. So let's go into it a little bit more. So we've got lovely height, we've got that pyramid shape. Can you see from the top going down, the top going down, and then the top coming to the front. So there is a little bit of a gap between. So this is where my fillers come in next. So we've got our thrillers at the back. I'd say the catmint is a bit of both, a filler and a thriller. The penstemon and the grass are definitely thrillers. We've got the euchre at the front, which are filler and spiller. And now I'm going to go in with some more fillers and spillers to fill in the gaps. And then what will happen is, because they're annual plants, they're fairly young, but I've bought bigger ones to get an instant impact display. They're going to fill the gaps and then add a bit of the middle height that we need once they get going, and also add a bit more spilling as well around the sides to break up, because the euchre is taking full centre stage at the bottom at the moment. So adding in the annuals will add in colour lower down and make our pyramid or triangles complete. So visually it will make sense and put it together and soften the way that it all comes down together. So let's carry on building. So how many of you, put in the comments below, think right now that is full enough? That's as full as you should go. Is it? I don't think so. So let's add in some more and I will explain why we're filling it so much and what the benefits are. Okay, let's turn it back round and turn you back round as well. So I'm going to start off with something in the middle, somewhere in here, just behind the euchre, because there is a little bit of a gap just behind there. So I'm going to go in with the petunia. There we go. Lovely petunia. That beautiful deep purple. Petunias come in an absolute myriad of different colours, shades. But I'm going to go for a nice deep purple just to marry up the reddy purple tones of the euchre with the more pinky purple tones of the penstemon, and of course the mauvey blue of the nepeta. Of course you can do this in any colour you like. You can completely go fiery, you could go mixed up, you could go more pastel-y colours, because there's so many available in penstemon and petunia and lobelia. You can go for any colour scheme that you like, but I'm going to go for this one. So it's a lovely size annual. I always go bigger. I recommend going bigger on annuals if you can. What I'm saying is go a little bit later. So rather than go early, especially if you haven't got space anywhere where you can look after young plants whilst it's still potentially going to be a bit cold, go for a little bit later, so end of May into June if you want to, if you can wait that long, and go for bigger plants, bigger perennials, which are usually available quite early on, but they obviously don't come into flower until later in the summer. Bigger annuals, you've got less wait time, you've got less time having to look after them, your success rate will be higher. So if you're not particularly interested in growing from a young stage and you want an instant impact, just hang on a couple of extra weeks. You'll get bigger stuff. It'll cost a little bit more, but you'll get an instant impact if you can afford it. If not, go earlier in the season, apply what I'm doing today, but with smaller plants, and then just let them grow, which is absolutely fine. But if you're late to the party, or you can't be bothered with the faff of smaller plants and you've got budget, then go for slightly bigger if you can, because it just instantly looks great, and you're not waiting forever for display to kick in. And usually what happens is if you are late with smaller plants, or even not late with smaller plants and you haven't been able to care for them properly, therefore they're stunted, your displays come on much later. You can't enjoy them as early. And then by the time they've sort of come into their own, it's time to get them out and put the autumn or the winter stuff in. A lot of people are amazing at growing small and young plants, so please do it if you're good at it, absolutely, and you've got space for it, etc. But I'm just saying, if you're not a massive gardener but still want to have a go for bigger if you can and budget allows, because you'll get instant gratification, and obviously things will get bigger and better as the season goes on, even at this stage. So if you can, go for that. If not, go a few months earlier with the same principles that I'm giving you today with smaller plants, and then watch them grow. If you're able to and you love doing that bit, that's absolutely cool as well. Gorgeous, beautiful colour. You can get this in a white as well. So this is sort of our upright but also floppy. So I'm going to pop this in next to the euchre, and hopefully you'll see how that's going to come together and break up the euchre and the pot and add height all at the same time. So excuse me whilst I reach in, squodge it in down that side, a little bit low, so I'm going to just lift it up a little bit, pop some compost in around the side, that's it, down the side and round and under. So if I pull that back a bit, can you see how that's really marrying up beautifully with the gorgeous euchre colour, but giving us a bit of height and also giving us a bit of flop, a bit of fill and spill around the outside as well. So that is looking lovely already. Get that bedded in nicely. So that petunia has got actually plenty of room to really spread out and get going. So how are we looking? So what I'm going to do, so that's looking very full probably to you guys, isn't it? Do you think? There's a bit of space around the back here. But what I'm going to do first is fill in the bigger gaps with compost, and then any really major areas of compost that are open to the eye, I'm going to fill in with some lobelia. Trust me, I will explain the process. So lift that up, you can see there's still gaps there, so make sure you're always lifting your foliage up to check for gaps. Because although there's not a lot of space that I'm leaving, any space there is needs compost and it needs nutrients as much as you can. So a little bit in, using fingers to tuck it in. You're tucking your plants in, you're bedding them in. Okay, so there's a nice layer of compost in, nice and full, but I can see there's a gap and it's towards the back of the pot. But always think about what you can see behind. If something fails at the front, watch your backup literally at the back of the pot. I'm going to pop some lobelia in all of the little gaps that I can find around the back and around the front for that matter. I've got some lovely white and blue mix. Now this is a little bit yellow because it's been in the pack too long. So if you find yourself a bargain at the garden centre and it looks fairly similar to this with a bit of yellow on, don't worry. You've put new compost, new nutrients into the compost with slow release fertiliser. If it's still flowering, I've got fairly good fresh foliage on there. Buy it if it's cheap and whack it in your container straight away. Great value for money. So they're not going over, the yellow will drop and it will reflush and turn green again. So a little bargain finder tip for you there. So we've got that little gap here. Just going to move the compost apart with my hands and literally pop it in. A little bit of compost to bed it in, but not too much. Okay, so turning the pot round, you can see there's a bit more here. Can you see that? So let's put another one in there. And just using hands to move aside the compost, chuck it in, literally pop some compost around it if it's got a bit of too much of a gap, but really firm it in. If you snap any bits of plant off, annuals or perennials, they regenerate very easily and quite quickly usually, so don't be scared, and don't be scared if you snap some of the root system off as well. They'll recover. They've got plenty of time and you've got plenty of feed in here to give them the energy to recover quite quickly. So we flip it round a bit. There's a bit of a gap here. Let's put the blue one in, shall we? Oh, that's a bit of a blue and a white mix. That must have been an accident during the growing process. Again, nice bit of space. And plonk it in. Really push it down firmly. Get those roots sitting next to each other tightly. Bit of compost at the front. It's amazing how much compost you can get in, and it's really important. That's why I keep saying doing as firmly as you can. Because this size pot, you want to squeeze as much compost in as you can. As you can see, I'm really going to make these roots compete with each other. Okay, so that's going to really, when that gets going, these lobelias will come up quite high amongst the foliage of the euchre. So eventually they'll pop up a little bit and then they'll go over the edge as well. But that blue against the purpley red euchre is just stunning, isn't it? So are we happy? Are we happy with that? I might just get one more in, you know. I think that's still too gappy this side by the Nepeta. So I'm probably going to put a little one in there as well. That's going to take a lot of pushing aside. Remember, with a seasonal display, you want impact. So if you are going for the earlier option with smaller plants, if you can pack more of the smaller plants in together, that's ideal because you're already filling the pot and then they'll fill even more as they grow. Right, what I'm going to do is I've filled as much. I'm just cleaning the sides off a little bit around the outside. You can sort of see, so for you this angle was more to plant, how close to plant. What I'm now going to do is take you off the sand and I'll give you a 360 tour of the planter and I'll explain why on earth have I filled it so full. All will become clear. Right, so here it is in all of its glory. Let's give you a little bit of a walk around. Now, this is the worst it's going to look, providing you are watering and feeding and maintaining. Although it's not a lot of maintenance, it's more the feeding. So if I step back, you see our heights, triangle, triangle, and then just this gap here will slowly be filled by the petunia as it grows up amongst the plants. So these plants are going to act as a bit of a staking system for the petunia to grow a bit more upright rather than flopping over. And then we've got our lobelia around the outside filling the gaps, and again that's as small as it's going to be. It's going to get bigger and it's going to flop and it's going to raise its game amongst the others. And our scarola, the same, that's going to get bigger and better. The euchre is already looking really good. So why have I filled it so full? My very first job was working in a nursery where we planted loads of hanging baskets and containers, and we grew a lot of our own plants from plug and seed, which I was involved in as well, breaking out the plants early January, growing them on, putting them in hanging baskets. Even at younger stage, so me talking earlier about buying younger plants, having to wait, as long as you've got the grow room and the heat to keep them alive, to get them out earlier, is fine. But even then, when we used to do it on a commercial basis, we used to pack the plants in. So why do you do that? Let them compete. Plants will compete with each other. So if you're putting the root systems in really close to each other in the container, they're going to be fighting over the nutrients that you've put in, right? So competing, they're going to display better. They're going to go into panic mode. They're going to think, oh my goodness, I need to flower, I need to seed, I need to reproduce because I've got to take over this space. They don't take over the space. None of these varieties really take over. But the idea is they're competing. So you've got the competitiveness, but then you're covering it off with the fact you've put a slow release fertiliser in there, obviously fresh compost, which you would do in any container. And then, so they're in panic mode, but they're also getting the nutrients at the same time. And then you're going to top it up with feed. So whether it's tomato-based food for potassium and phosphorus to get the flowers really going through the actual season that they're in flower, or whether you're putting a bone meal on in the autumn, those roots again are going to be competing with each other whilst all the stuff underground's happening during the winter months. But also you're still giving them feed. So you're getting a bit of a balance of them competing and performing, but also giving them the nutrients so that when they are in competing mode or competitive mode, they've got the nutrients for all of them to succeed. So it's a little bit of, I don't know, trickery, cheating. You're coaxing the plants into competing with each other, but giving them the tools they need to grow to compete with each other. So that's the trick of the trade. And the key is, when everything's finished in the autumn, you might want to leave the seed heads of the grass in, and the euchre obviously will be there most of the year to give you that colour and structure for the winter months if you want to leave it somewhere. If you've got somewhere where you can pop it out of the way because it's maybe not looking its best, you could. Or if you are leaving it for autumn winter, replace the annuals with pansies and violas. Put some springtime bulbs in as well, and then extend your display so that you don't have to hide the pot out the way when all the other perennials have died down and the summer annuals are finished. Just change it into the next season, and then the perennials will return next spring. Give it another mulch in the spring if you so wish. And then yeah, that's the trick with containers. It is feeding and topping up mulch in the autumn and the spring. It's particularly if you've got perennials or shrubs. That's what they need for success. Keep them well fed. Make them compete by planting them really close together, and obviously you want them to grow because we want it to look even better than it does right now. You want that to sort of flop over the edge, you want that to thicken up, you want the petunia to come up through the middle. So we've given it feed in slow release form. We're going to keep on feeding it with a tomato food or just a general grow feed for the summer months to encourage them to keep going but competing at the same time. I know I keep hitting the same notes, but that is why I have filled it so much, and to be honest I probably would put some more lobelia in there just to really pack it out. So this is it. This is the worst it's going to look, which looks pretty cool for me at the moment. Now this might be a bit hit and miss with some people because of the colour tones and the heights, but use the same principle and apply it to plants that you like or the colours that you like that are perennial mixed with annuals, and you'll have a lovely display, not just for the summer and autumn, because a lot of this will keep flowering until the first frost. So that'll be a long display. And then of course the perennials come back year on year, so just look after it. Keep it well watered through the summer months, keep it well fed, give it a mulch, and you've got a planter that's going to last for 3-4 years, maybe 5, and interchange it through the seasons. So summer bedding for the summer, autumn bedding for the autumn. So that's it, that's the project. So easy to pull together and surprising how much you can really cram into a pot. It's all about making the plant compete with each other, but also giving them enough nutrients so that when they go into competitive mode, they've got enough fuel to fire them up to really perform for you. So I hope this gave you some inspiration. Give it a go at home. Send me your creations, share them on Instagram, share them on X, tag me in at Lottie Knew It. I'd love to see what you've created yourselves. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to keep up to date with all my new videos upcoming, and also go and check out my old videos, see what you think. If you've got any ideas for DIYs for me to do or you'd like me to do with gardening, make sure you pop a comment down below and give me a like as well if you enjoyed it. Thank you so much everybody, and I will see you next time. Happy gardening.